let's do this though before we get into all that, because we've had our guest patiently waiting in the
Yeah.
wings now for about 25 minutes. He may think that we forgot about it. Why don't we go ahead and bring in our guest, Chris Alexander, because he's going to talk about rhinos, and it might surprise y'all who he's going to call out as a
What
rhino.
rhinos is he like
Rhinos.
a South African tour guide hunting
He
guy? Is
must
that
have gone on one of those safaris or something like that. So I'm going to switch
no?
screens and
He's a South Louisiana hunt guy, right?
oh yeah.
Hunting rhinos down there.
Yeah,
Okay,
so let me
okay.
switch screens. And Chris, can you hear us or can we hear you yet?
Well, I can hear you, and I can hear you, and I'm hoping that you can hear me.
I can hear you, Duke. Can you hear Chris? And more
I got
importantly, everybody watching, let us know in the comments. Can y'all hear Chris?
got him loud and clear. Got him loud and clear. So now, Chris Alexander. Rumor has it that you're the runt of another little Alexander guy running around North Louisiana, and somehow there's this connection, but you're the runt of the two. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
Well, it's accurate, but he's been whooping me my whole life. But he won't come down here now because he knows if he does, I can whip him now. So now he just won't. Now he just won't show up.
Brotherly love. Gotta love it.
So for all of our viewers that may not realize this or not, and to connect the dots, Chris Alexander is the brother of one Royal Alexander, who a lot of you folks from North Louisiana I know are familiar with. And more importantly, you know, Chris, to hat tip to you and all of your family. I mean, your parents obviously raised a good family. You guys got a pretty prestigious award down in Lafayette here. What has it been? 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, that's right. Uh, we were down there at the Republican Victory Convention in Lafayette, and my mom and my dad posthumously were awarded a pro life award there for all the work that my mom and dad did going back many years, right there in Shreveport for the pro life movement. In fact, our mom, started the first pro life pregnancy referral center right there in Shreveport and helped out a lot of young girls over many years. And it was a real honor for her, you know. And my mom is almost 90 now and still hanging in there and really could still whip all of us. And she's just a great lady. And it was really great to be up on the stage with her while she received that award. It wasn't about me or about any of our siblings. It was about my mom and my dad because they worked in the trenches for many years. And I think it was just wasn't really coincidental. I think it was providential that my mom happened to be received that award 2 days after Roe v. Wade was reversed. And I think God has a way of doing things.
Well, I got to tell you, just I've somewhat followed your family. Obviously, I've been closer to Royal than any of your other siblings, but I got to tell you, I didn't know that that was going to be happening, and I literally was kind of sitting in the back of the room and taking it in, and it gave, I got to tell you, it gave me a chill. I mean, I was just impressed to be able to call, y'all friends. I mean, it just
Well,
you
that
don't
means
get
a
that.
lot to me for you to say that. I really appreciate that. That means more to me than you realize. And God bless you for saying that. And my mom and dad never really sought any kind of accolades or any kind of awards for anything. They never really wanted attention. They just wanted to try to help the unborn and to help young girls who found themselves in situations of distress. And so we're just blessed to have been a part of that.
Well,
All right.
now go. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rex.
Oh, no, that's fine. But I was just letting y'all know that I've been working on this letter that was sent out. So when we get ready to start talking about that, I'll be able to queue up parts of the letter that Chris sent out, and it starts, "Dear friends," and goes right into talking about some of our local politicians. So when y'all get ready, I'll pull that letter up.
But before
Yeah.
you do that, Rex, I have to wish Duke a happy anniversary, and I'll join in your sentiment that I'm somewhat shocked that apparently a very patient and forbearing woman has been putting up with him for 25 years. So God bless your marriage, and God bless your wife.
Well, thank you. And little secret to everybody: fishing does wonders. It does. I mean, a lot of you guys, y'all with your fancy pants, you want to get roses and all that stuff. Take her fishing. I mean, that's the secret.
Well, I'll be
Take her
honest with you,
fishing.
Duke. Yeah, that might work. That might work for y'all. But if I were to do that to my wife were mad at me, and I said, "Look, I'll make it up to you by taking you fishing," she'd probably shoot me on the spot. So that's kind of a case by case. That's a case by case analysis there, Duke.
I got you. I got you. Well, look, you are an old chip off of the block from your parents, and doing good work. Um, you're up to some good work going on right now. I mean, I think you've got a new group that you're working with, or tell us about what you're doing and how we come to have you on the show tonight.
Well, Duke, we went down to the legislature. We've been down there for about 2 years now, going and watching what happens down there. And I got some very direct exposure to exactly how some of these legislators operate and what they do and how they kill good bills and how they advance bad bills and how, more importantly, how they do it in a way that is often very hard to detect. And so we said, we have to do something about this because these Republicans down here, some of these liberal Republicans are down here killing really, really good legislation and advancing bad legislation. And they're going back up to different places in Louisiana, like North Louisiana, and talking to their constituents about what great Republicans and patriots they are. And I said, that's just bold-faced lying. And we have to show and expose this. And nobody's fighting for Louisiana citizens down here. They're all fighting for the big special interests, and we have to do something about this. And so we formed LCAG. It's Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, and it is simply a citizen advocacy organization that monitors legislation and basically exposes Republicans who are undermining good constitutional legislation and revealing it meticulously, like the way they kill things in committee, like the way Representative Thomas Presley did on 3 separate bills down here, and the way Barrow Peacock very feebly refused to support a veto override session. What a very, very weak man. What a very, very weak leader for him to do that. And again, I don't know these people personally, and frankly, I'm sure they're decent human beings, but I did see I personally observed what they did in the legislature with my own eyes, and our own team did, and their constituents have a right to know exactly what they did. And it was some things that I thought were very, very objectionable and did a profound disservice to the citizens of Louisiana this past session. So that's mainly what I'm called to talk about: Barrow Peacock and Thomas Presley. People need to know.
Well, let's, we have a lot of politicians that come on the show, and we take a lot of shots at politicians, and we talk specifics on a lot of bills and different things over the years. Not so much here lately, but specifically, let's talk about, some specific examples and how that is important to people watching the show. Like there's one in particular that seems pretty simple to me. I think it was HB 594. Wasn't that the bodily autonomy bill? Is that one of the ones on your list of bills?
That is the bodily autonomy bill. That's exactly right, Duke. And it was it was an extraordinarily important bill. I mean, it was so profoundly important in light of the draconian actions of our governor acting in conjunction with the Department of Health and the CDC, just the oppressive hand that they put down on citizens of Louisiana regarding COVID and the vaccine and all the misinformation that they put out there. and he had a really good opportunity to stand up and with his authority and power and basically slap him in the face and say, you know what, you destroyed a lot of people's lives, you hurt a lot of people through despotic decrees that were not based in science, through abuse of your authority. And many people not only suffered then, but are continuing to suffer because of that. And HB 594 was a great bill from Representative Amade that was simply designed to address that issue and establish once and for all, statutorily in Louisiana, that people have core bodily autonomy. And we have the fundamental right to make our own health care decisions, and the government has no right getting between me and my doctor, period. And it was a very, very great bill. It included a penalty provision, and it also, that was 1022. But the bottom line is, it went before the committee, and it was killed in committee by Representative Presley and Representative Bagley, who's also a Republican, Representative McMahon, and Representative Turner. It failed in committee 11-5. This straightforward bill would simply told Governor Edwards, no, every Louisiana citizen has the right to decide their own medical choices, period. It's a core constitutional requirement. You'd think every conservative constitutional Republican in the entire state of Louisiana would support this bill. But it was killed by 4 Republicans in the Health and Welfare Committee. It failed 11-5, and it would have passed 9-7 if these weak Republicans had supported it. And Thomas Presley opposed it. I think that is reprehensible in light of the history of abuse that the people of this state have experienced under this governor. He had an absolute obligation to stand up on this bill, and he failed.
Well, so here's the inevitable question. Not to interrupt you there, Duke. Here's the inevitable question, Chris, is why? I mean, I know you can't necessarily get inside of Presley's head, but did he seem to give any kind of justification for his, and I would agree with you, for his wrong vote and stance on this legislation?
Well, not that I am aware of, to be honest with you. I feel like it's one of the bills where, he didn't offer too much of an explanation. And I'll curious as, I mean, doesn't it beg the question, who is he beholden to, Duke? I mean, who's he beholden to? I mean, I know that in committee on this bill, I went back and looked at the committee notes on 594, and it's going through committee. Representative Presley, Beryl Amade, is sitting right in front of him explaining the bill to the committee. It's a good bill. Presley doesn't ask one question. He doesn't say one word. He doesn't ask or suggest anything about how the bill might be improved if he has a problem with it. He just sits there, says absolutely nothing. He expresses no sympathy or empathy for the citizens of Louisiana who've suffered at the hands of this governor and this oppressive Department of Health, or why a bill like this might be needed. He says absolutely nothing. He's sitting there like a potted plant. And then when it comes down to vote, he doesn't do anything except vote no. And that's not leadership. That is not leadership for the citizens of Louisiana. That's not what the people of his district voted for. If the people of Thomas Presley's district knew that he had an opportunity to codify in law a core constitutional freedom, which is bodily autonomy, we have a choice over our own medical decisions, and he failed to act on that, I'm sorry, but that's a problem. That's a big problem if you're going back home and telling people what a good conservative you are.
So, that why question that Rex asked, and I want to run this by you, someone suggested to me that on this bill, a lot of folks may have voted against, citizens being able to have the right to determine their own healthcare decisions. I mean, it blows my mind that these guys would not let people make their own decision. But I mean, they said the bill included all vaccines, and one specific example somebody said was well, we don't want to go having to fight polio again. But my
We
argument to that was
nonsense,
go ahead.
dude. That is absolute nonsense. You know what a red herring is? That's an absolute red herring. We all have natural immunity in this country to polio now. 99% of this country is vaccinated from polio. That's complete nonsense. And it doesn't change the fact that if he had an issue with that, you know what he could have done? You know what Thomas Presley could have done? He could have sat there and said, Representative Amade, I understand that the spirit of this bill, behind this bill, is the fact that people have been oppressed over COVID and all the disaster that has caused. Why don't you just specify in the bill the COVID vaccine? In light of the fact that the science disproves it, that 99.9% of the people who come in contact with COVID are unaffected by it. The symptoms are generally mild. You don't even know you have it. So, yeah, there's a compelling reason for the government not to ever be able to compel someone to get this vaccine. But he didn't do that. He sat up there and said nothing and voted against a bill that, at least in spirit, was very needed, even if he could have suggested an amendment or two. My point here is that he showed no leadership, none. He killed a bill that was thoughtful and that was expressing the overwhelming frustration of citizens across Louisiana regarding the way that our governor and this government has responded to this pandemic, and he did nothing. That's my point.
Well, let me throw this out there as food for thought too. So if he, of course, I didn't watch any of the video or anything like that, but of the proceedings. But if he didn't ask any questions at all or have any commentary or input to that, then it sounds like he definitely had his mind made up when he went in to vote, or he just randomly decided to, vote against it. So if he went in there with his mind made up, then that sounds like somebody else had already convinced him, to vote against this bill. And I'm not going to accuse him of something that I can't say for sure, but a lot of times that's when special interests have come in beforehand. We've seen this over and over again with politicians, and, just grease the wheels to make him vote one way or the other. I'm not saying that's what he did because I don't know, but we've seen that before with lots of political issues.
Right. Duke, look, the bottom line is what he did is far more important, in my opinion, than why he did it. Although why he did it is interesting, and there's a number of different possibilities there. Perhaps he got maybe Shakedown Schexnayder spoke to him and said, I need you to oppose this bill or whatever. Perhaps it was a lobby, someone in the pharmaceutical industry. I don't know who his donors are. We haven't drilled deep down into that yet, but we're going to, and we're going to find out exactly why he did what he did. But the bottom line is, one thing that's indisputable, one thing that is not subject to any kind of dispute, is that arguably we're looking here 594. Arguably, when it comes to bodily autonomy and individual sovereignty that's guaranteed under the Constitution, arguably the most important bill that came before him this entire session was this bill 594 by Amade, that we will make our own medical decisions and government get off our backs. You don't have a right to be in our lives on this stuff. And he failed us. I don't know. And again, Duke, to your question, was it out of weakness? Was it out of corruption? I don't have any idea. And frankly, that's of less concern to me than his constituents being able to know what he did.
Well, on some of these other bills, and I'll for you to say, I want you to segue into some of those other bills and explain those bills, and I guess you could say cohorts that oppose good legislation, and saying that, you said something just a second ago. You said lobby. are you saying that lobby is, actively, opposing people having the right to be able to choose whether or not to be vaccinated or not? Did they take an active role on some of these bills?
Well, Duke, I'll tell you. I don't know if it was on 594 or 1022. I can't exactly remember, but it was on 1022. Y'all want to talk about 1022?
Yeah.
We can talk about 1022 because this was a bill that was so important, and it was it basically said that the government, no entity can mandate that any Louisiana citizen take any product for which the manufacturer of that product is immune from any kind of civil liability. So basically, you sell me something and it's defective and it's bad and it causes real harm to me, and you're the one who made it. And the reason why it harmed me or my family was because you made it in a defective way. But I don't get to sue you for your negligence. Yet you get to order me to take it. Okay? That's what 1022 was designed to prohibit. It basically said that if the person who makes the product cannot be sued, if they're shielded from liability while they're making millions and millions of dollars off of this, but they can't be sued if it messes somebody up, guess what? Nobody gets to force a Louisiana citizen to take it. Doesn't that sound pretty fair to you, Duke? Doesn't that sound like a pretty fair piece of legislation? And it also, the bill created a cause of action if in fact someone did have to take a product, a vaccine or any product, and it harmed them, and the manufacturer of that product was immune from liability, guess what? It would have created a cause of action where the person who took it could sue whoever forced them to take it, whether it was an employer or an administrator, whoever it was, the state of Louisiana, the government, whatever, they could sue them for that. Presley opposed that bill, and he opposed it vocally on the floor of the chamber. It made it to the House floor and it was defeated there. And for that reason, right now, if someone is forced to take a vaccine or any kind or anything by the government or an employer, whoever it is, and it really messes them up, guess what? They can't sue the manufacturer and they can't sue the person who forced them to do it. So they could get to force someone to take a product or a vaccine, but the person has no recourse against them if the person who forced them to do it screws their lives up permanently. Presley opposed that bill, and it is absolutely reprehensible that he would have done that. And the reason why they had a manufacturer's representative down there and someone from the State Chamber of Commerce down there, and they were saying how this would create a litigious environment, and therefore they were opposed to it because it would create too many lawsuits. Guess what? Sorry, my friend, but if you force me to do something that hurts me or my family, and I don't get to sue you for damages over that, that's a huge problem. This bill would have clarified and taken care of that, and Representative Presley opposed it. That is reprehensible to me.
Now you 1022. I heard you did an interview with Louis Avallone and Stephen Parr on their show, and I think it was this bill that you were talking about, and you raised Blake Miguez up, and they either asked you a question and got you sidetracked, and you weren't able to finish that thought. Was Blake Miguez or what other representatives were kind of on the wrong side of that up here, or on the wrong side of this bill? Were you about to say that Blake Miguez was on the wrong side of this? Expand on that a little bit.
No, dude. What I was going to say, Blake Miguez. Well, I'm gonna have to shift gears on this for a second because Blake Miguez put forward a great bill, House Bill 811. And I know that you remember Zuckerberg and all the cash that he injected into the swing states up there, hundreds of millions of dollars directly into the coffers of those election officials in those swing states up there, and basically bought that election. He bought those election officials up with the dark money that he pumped into those the election process in those states. And so Blake Miguez, who's a very fine representative from what I've been able to see, brought forward a great bill which would have prohibited any election official, whether they're a registrar, a voter, clerk of court, commissioner of elections, from receiving any private money from any source for the ostensible purpose of conducting an election. It would have prohibited dark money in the Louisiana election process. It would have kept our elections completely clean. And Blake Miguez brought that forward. It made it through the House committee, the House, the Senate committee, and it got all the way to the Senate floor. And Duke, I'm going to give you an opportunity to answer. And who do you think in the Louisiana Senate killed that great bill that would have kept money, huge amounts of private dark money out of the Louisiana electoral process? Who do you think killed that?
I would have to say leadership.
It was leadership, and his name is Representative Blank Page Cortez, as my good friend Moon Griffon down here refers him. I don't get credit for the name, but it's very apt. So let me tell you what happened. It gets on the floor, okay? There's a point in the legislative session, Duke, at which the required votes go from a simple majority to a 2/3 majority in order to pass something. After 6 p.m., beginning on the second to last day, I believe it is, session, any bills put forward require no longer a simple majority vote. They require a 2/3 vote. And so that's a lot harder to get a bill passed, you would agree, if it gets to that point. So Blake Miguez's bill was down there day after day after day waiting to be called, and you've got to have the Senate president call the bills, right? You got to have it. If he doesn't call it, guess what? It's not getting heard. So Blank Page Cortez, the Republican leader of the Louisiana State Senate, with the opportunity to pass a very, very important election integrity bill, the most important of the entire session, stands up there and delays it and delays it and delays it until a point where it no longer requires a majority of senators to pass. It now requires a 2/3. So he gets it to that point, and then he realizes that it's still going to pass even with 2/3. 2/3 of the Louisiana state senators want this bill, so he had to take it to another level. So he made sure that 2 of the senators that would have been there to pass it were not there. One had left the chamber and one had gone on vacation. The bill needed 26 votes to pass. It got 25 and it failed by 1 vote because of Page Cortez, the Republican leader of the Senate. That's what he did, and now he wants to run for lieutenant governor on his conservative credentials. Do you see a problem with that? I do.
Well, the biggest problem I see is that most people who call themselves conservative, if you ask them, well, what does it mean for you to be a conservative? They really don't have a good answer. They just start going down some of the Republican Party planks or, the talking points and all that. But in reality, they're not what I would consider a true conservative. And let me bring up one other point for everybody to think about for a second. So we throw around the term, the acronym RINO, Republican in name only, quite a bit. But the problem is, I would argue that being a RINO tends to be the norm with people who are in the Republican Party. They're actually the norm when they should be the outcasts of it. But it doesn't look like they are. There's too many of them.
Yeah. Duke, was that Rex or Duke?
That was
Rex.
Okay. Rex, I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. And the reason why they're allowed to fester is that people are not calling them out in the right way. I dare say that there are a whole lot of people in Representative Presley's district who are very offended by the heavy-handed actions of our governor, by the Louisiana Department of Health regarding this vaccine, and even the national government, without Anthony Fauci and so forth. It was just disastrous experience, and there's still a whole lot of people struggling in their jobs and their employment and their families regarding this vaccine. I've never seen a government engage in such tyranny with regard to a medical procedure as they did with this vaccine, and I guarantee you there are people in Thomas Presley's district who would want to know that he had opposed legislation like this that was very, very important. And by the way, Representative Beryl Amade is a very patriotic legislature, and she stood very courageously on a number of issues down there. She is just a great human being. But we just have to start basically calling them out. And by the way, guys, my group has decided that we're not going any more Republican Democrat. We're going globalist patriot. So the globalist, what used to be the D is now globalist, and what used to be the R is now patriot. Because Democrat and Republican, Duke, I think you may have alluded to that earlier, that don't mean that much anymore. And globalist and patriot, anybody who ties into the big government globalist agenda, they're gonna be targeted, and people who qualify to be on the patriot side of the ledger, well, we're going to put them there. But I think that the days of using these distinctions like Republican and Democrat, and I'd be interested in hearing your response to this, both of y'all, those terms at this point seem to be meaningless to me.
Well, this is Rex again. Duke, not to interrupt you, but let me throw out one point before I forget it. So here's the only problem. I agree with you, Chris, that saying Republican or Democrat, even like I said, saying conservative, I mean, I can define conservative really easily in one sentence. Most people can't. But here's the only problem with using the terms globalist and patriot. And I understand the meaning and what you're trying to drive forward with it. But unfortunately, that's closely tied. Those are the two terms that our interesting friend, so to speak, Alex Jones used. And we all see what happened to him as they raked him through the coals. And granted, he went off on some pretty far tangents sometimes, but some of the points that he brought up are correct. So that's the only thing that I would caution being careful using those particular terms is, he's already been sent out to pasture and he used those terms.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I would say also, though, that Alex Jones continues to fight, and some of the things that Alex Jones has said have been turned out to be true. Some of the things that he said have absolutely not. But that I'm listening to what you're saying, and it's important that I didn't even realize, frankly, that he use those designations, globalist and patriot.
Yeah, now I've kind of outed myself that I used to listen to Alex Jones, I suppose. But like you said, a lot of the topics he brought up were spot on. But yes, those were two of his, I would argue, most used buzzwords. And you know how marketing and branding and all that sort of thing matters now, and everything's narrowed down into, just a couple of keywords and sound bites. So you may want to go back and do a little digging on that. But I agree 100% with the sentiment of using those terms, of course.
Yeah.
Rex,
that makes sense to me. And we just so do you agree with me, Rex, that the term Democrat and Republican right now in the current circumstances that we live in are almost indistinguishable?
Well, I agree 100%. As a matter of fact, I tell everybody, look, I vote Republican because I can't vote for anybody that stands for the Democratic platform. But the truth is, I would argue that I'm far more of a libertarian / independent, so to speak, in many of my views, simply because the Republican identity, in my opinion, especially here in Louisiana, as you've just pointed out with some of our quote-unquote fellow Republicans, the whole brand is tarnished.
It is. Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. Can I go to one other bill regarding Presley? Then I want to move to something else, if y'all don't mind.
we're going to go there, but I can't let you go too much further because I got to go back to a few things that you said. Now, you said Page Cortez is running for lieutenant governor, but isn't it isn't it true that it's rumored that Scheck Snyder is going to try to make a run at lieutenant governor as well?
That
And
Duke, that's what I hear, and that will be an interesting situation. I don't know how
so,
that's all going to work out, but I did hear that about Scheck Snyder. I've actually heard it about both of them, and
so, so,
I
so,
do know
given,
this
given,
that
given that, hang
recently,
on,
and
Chris.
again, I don't know what your feelings are about Billy Nungesser. I think he's a good person. I think he's got a great heart. I don't know how philosophically conservative he is, but I think he's a man of service. I think he's got a good heart. But I'll say that I went to, I was at something for Billy Nungesser not too long ago, and Clay Scheck-Snyder introduced him. And I
So,
thought while I was there that was probably, if you're trying to burnish your conservative credentials, that maybe it's not a good idea to have Clay Scheck-Snyder introducing you at an event. That's just my estimation of it. But that kind of gave me some indication that Scheck-Snyder wants to be lieutenant governor. But I've heard from people that Page Cortez does. So I don't know how that's going to shake out.
well,
I do know
well,
that Page Cortez a couple of times during the Senate session would walk in there and walk up to Page Cortez up at the top there, and they would talk, and he'd hand him different things, and I know what they were doing. Page Court, they were talking about bills that they wanted to hear and bills that they wanted to kill, and we're talking about two liberals. Okay, I'm sorry, those guys are
well,
liberals.
well,
Those guys
the
are
word that I was told,
beholden
the
to
word that I,
Governor Edwards,
Chris,
and they do not have
Chris,
any allegiance to the Constitution or to conservatism. I'm telling you, I saw it with my own two eyes.
well, Chris, okay, I got to ask you this question. I've been trying to get it into you for a while here now. Because what I understand is what was going on down there was that Scheck Snyder and Cortez were at war and were killing each other's bills. Like the election integrity bill, I think it was 1022 that you were talking about with the Zuckerbucks. That Cortez was trying to kill a Scheck Snyder bill because they were at war. It is that
Well,
an observation that you made?
if they were at war, Duke, I can tell you right now, they had a funny way of showing it. I was sitting there watching them, and I watched Scheck Snyder go into the Senate chambers and go up and talk to Cortez, and they would visit and this, that, and the other. And look, all I know is the bills that they had an awful lot of bills in common that neither one of them wanted. So if they were at war with one another, they still had an awful lot of things in common that they jointly wanted to kill. And I know I can tell you that there are no two people in Louisiana politics who have done more over the past 2 years to sabotage the conservative agenda and good constitutional legislation than those two guys. They do not have a right to serve in elected politics in Louisiana ever again because of what they have done. The fact that Cortez, for instance, would kill a bill that would have cleaned up our election process, other bills too. I could sit here and talk to y'all all night about what that guy did right in front of me in the state legislature. It's one of those deals where we have to make sure that people understand exactly who he is and exactly who Scheck Snyder is. It's just Duke. I'd love to sit down here with you and Rex. Just for one day down there at the legislative session, and just get your reaction to some of this stuff.
Well,
I think you would
isn't
find
a lot of
it
the
interesting.
isn't a lot of this from these legislators that are supposed to be representing the people? And we had this conversation not too long with Congressman Higgins and talking about DC, but Baton Rouge isn't that much different. And isn't it a lot of wheeling and dealing? It's not about what's best in the best interest of the citizens, but isn't it about, hey, the buddy system? You help me with my bill, I'm going to help you with your bill, and what's best for everybody is not what the end result is. It's what ends up being the best for, the legislator who's trying to push some issue.
Yeah. Duke, I gotta tell you that's what I've seen very, very directly. It's like you walk in there, and one of the big complaints that my wife had, you have a whole host of Louisiana citizens who go down during the legislative session and testify very passionately about these bills that are not good, and some, in favor of some that are good. And it is amazing the degree to which you kind of sense this condescension. You sense this idea that these guys are sitting up on a throne somehow, and they're not really accountable to us. They just kind of have to put up with us for a few hours and listen to our concerns and then do whatever the hell they want to do anyway. And I'm telling you that people sense that when we're down there. They do not view themselves, this is my perception, I can't speak for anyone else, but they do not view themselves as really accountable to the people as envisioned in the Constitution and in the Declaration of Independence. They view themselves, once they get there, as beholden only to the special interests and not to the average Louisiana citizen anymore. And I just think that it comes with the old notion, y'all probably heard this, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's very difficult to get into a position of authority and political power and not become corrupted by it. And it's the very rare man who can avoid that. In fact, probably the last one was probably Marcus Aurelius, who ruled the Roman Empire for 18 years and never, ever became corrupted by it. In fact, he wrote the Meditations. He was the great Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius, and he was one of the very few leaders in history who actually had enormous power, but never allowed himself to become corrupted by it. And I can't say that about anybody, or very, very few, down at the state legislature.
Well, go ahead, Rex.
Well, I was going to say, so I just had a comment up on the screen. I'm going to put it back up there. This is from Linda and Wayne Whittington Villamoret. Said all the deals that are made at Ruth Chris Steakhouse, and they are all in there together cutting their deals. I've seen this myself several times while I was in Baton Rouge. They are all one. I think that is one of the big problems.
Yeah, Rex,
well,
I think you're right. You're right about that.
And Chris,
and it's
something
one of the
else
deals where the only thing we can do, the only thing that we can do is make sure that every voter in these districts is aware of exactly what they're doing. We have to do it because they believe that they are untouchable, and we have to show them that they're not untouchable. I don't know.
Well,
it's barely.
Chris, don't we need more people? Chris, don't we need more people running? That's because there's not any competition. While we've been on the show, I had somebody ask him, who's running against Presley? Is anybody going to step up and run against Presley? Here's another thing. Qualifying for school boards. How many school boards across the state of Louisiana abused, the families and the children over all of these COVID mask mandates and all this BS? They belligerently abused people, in my opinion. How many people are right now, because qualifying is what, here in a couple of weeks?
Yeah. In other words, you're
for
saying
the majority of school boards across the state,
who's going to jump up and run for school board?
Yeah, because everybody watching the show, it's all great to hear us talking about these bills and the failures of our elected representatives who go down there and do one thing and then come back home and say they did something else. But if regular people,
your point is,
who's going to challenge them?
Yeah, that's a great point. And honestly, it is a big challenge to find good people to run against these guys. And we found one down here, but we're looking every day, Duke. We're looking every day to find good candidates to run against these guys. And Paula Davis, Moon Griffon calls her Paula Pelosi Davis. She is the biggest rhino in the state legislature, but she's attractive. She's blonde hair, attractive girl. And she won last time unopposed, but she's horrible. Okay, just absolutely horrible. She makes Thomas Presley look like Winston Churchill. Okay, and all I can tell you is we found someone to run against her. I'm not going to say his name yet, but he's going to run against her, and I think that she's vulnerable, and he's probably going to knock the biggest rhino in South Louisiana out of the state legislature if we work hard enough. But I agree with you. People have to step up and understand that if we don't start challenging these people and you don't show courage and come forward, ultimately we're going to lose our republic. We're going to lose our freedom. We're going to lose our liberty. And it takes courage to do it. So you're right. Somebody has to challenge him. And again, I don't know Presley's whole record. You may know more about his record than I do. I just know what I saw in 2022 on some critical bills, and I'm thinking, why would a Republican from North Louisiana, my hometown, come down here and oppose this legislation right in front of me? Why would you do that? What's the reason for that? And I haven't found one. And I think that if we continue to expose these things, perhaps it will encourage conservative constitutional citizens to run for office. And that's what we're doing.
So we got a comment here. It says Dodie Horton had an incredible bill in education and it was killed in committee. Now, before we segue over to Dodie, I want to remind everybody that Dodie also tried to put up the infamous basically toy gun bill at the behest of our good sheriff up here in Bossier Parish. And we all know how that went. But Chris, in your letter from your group and organization, you mentioned Dodie Horton. Now, up here, Dodie is well loved in District, what does she do? District 9, I believe. So tell us a little bit, because this will relate directly to Bossier folks up here. Tell us a little bit about Dodie. Why is she kind of in the crosshairs?
Well, I love Dodie. I think Dodie's a good representative. I think she's done a lot of things. She did the only thing I can possibly criticize Dodie for is that she did vote for this House Bill 165, was this green energy wind turbine boondoggle. And I think that maybe she didn't fully understand the bill, didn't really understand necessarily what was going on there. And, I got to tell y'all, it's very difficult for me to criticize Dodie because she brought a bill down here. It took a lot of courage for her to do it. And it really shouldn't take a lot of courage in Louisiana to bring the bill that I'm fixing to tell y'all about. But it was House Bill 837. And basically all the bill did, all it would have done, it would have prohibited public school teachers who teach kindergarten through 8th grade from allowing the teacher in those classrooms to talk about the teacher's gender identity or sexual orientation to a classroom full of grade school students. And it was brought forward because of all the poison that's being introduced in the public schools across the country. It was a good bill to basically say, guess what? When you're in the classroom, listen, you freak, don't bring up this kind of bullshit to the students, okay? You just can't do it. Talk about the subject at hand, talk about the issues at hand with your students. But basically it was don't bring up perverse sexual ideology in the classroom. She brought it forward and it was a very, very good bill. And I couldn't believe it. I'm sitting down there in the education committee, guys, and the bill was killed by Republican Representative Lance Harris, Republican Representative Vincent St. Blanc, the Rhino Barbara Freeberg out of Baton Rouge, and the Rhino Stephanie Hilferty out of Jefferson and Orleans Parish. Those four Republicans killed a bill that simply would have prohibited teachers from talking about radical sexual concepts to public school students in the classroom, okay? And the bill lost in committee. If all those four Republicans had voted for it, it would have gotten out of committee in an 8-3 vote, and it would have gone into the full House and probably would have passed. The Republican chairman, Lance Harris, had a great opportunity to lead on this bill. I don't know who bought and paid for him. I don't know. I don't have any idea who owns him, but somebody owns him, because a Republicans from Rapides Parish, chairman of a committee with a bill like this, to basically not only vote against a bill, but, well, actually, he didn't even have the courage to vote on it. He didn't even vote. But the other three voted against it. Bottom line is, it's reprehensible that this bill would have been killed by 4 Republicans in committee. This is a reprehensible failure to protect our public school children in school in Louisiana. And everybody should know these 4 Republicans' names. And Dodie Horton brought the bill, and I couldn't believe it. I'm sitting down there watching this, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. The kind of garbage they were coming up with and the objections it's like, who owns you? I felt like standing up in there and just saying, Representative Harris, who owns you? Because you're absolutely not accountable to the citizens of Louisiana. How do you oppose a bill like this? And how do you encourage, he's the chairman of the committee, by the way, and how do you encourage these 3 other Republicans to oppose a bill like this to protect Louisiana public school students? I just couldn't believe it. So it's very difficult for me to criticize Dodie, but I will say that, that she did vote for the green energy bill, which was just a monstrosity that passed in both houses, the House and the Senate.
Well, obviously somebody has to be cashing in on this green energy wind turbine things. I mean, look, our oil field service company, we worked up in the Rockies for countless years, and I can tell you, if you will travel up there to the foot of the north end of the runway in Casper, Wyoming, you can find the windmill graveyard burial ground right up there of all those dadgum wind turbines. They're burying them in the ground because they can't destroy them or something or another. What are we going to do? Just dump them off in the ocean with the next Katrina, Rita, Ida, or whatever that comes through there? Or are they just going to let them lay on the ocean floor out there? Because I don't think those things are going to be able to handle it.
They hadn't even built them out there yet in the Gulf, but I will tell you one. That everywhere this kind of wind energy turbine, green energy stuff has been tried, Germany and in other places, it's been a colossal failure. It just does not work. First of all, you have to rely on the wind's not blowing. Guess what? You don't get any energy. It's just not reliable. Secondly, there are thousands of birds that are killed in these turbine blades. It's an environmental disaster. But it just
well, that's a good point. That's a good point. Where's Ducks Unlimited? where is Ducks Unlimited?
That's a great point. Do you realize? I can't even remember the exact statistic, but it was staggering to me when I read the amount of wildlife that is killed every year by these turbines. I couldn't believe it. It was like, you got to be kidding me.
Well, who would have thought that? It just blew my mind. Who would have thought that giant blades turning around, in the sky and in thousands and thousands of acres would have killed birds? Who would have ever thought that?
I don't know. You have
so
to be,
what elected officials? What elected official is going to profit off of this? Getting these wind turbines down there in the Gulf.
Let me tell you, one of the co-authors of the bill. What I'm fixing to tell you guys is really the kind of thing that I think really turns off voters in Louisiana. One of the co-authors, Representative Joseph Ogeron out of Houma, I think it's Houma Thibodeau, owns Second Wind. It's called Second Wind LLC, Second Wind Machine LLC, or something. I don't know. Anyway, about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, his company built 2 of the big super feeders. And you have to have the big super feeder vessels in order to transport the turbine components out to their offshore site so they can construct all the turbines out there. So his company built the big super feeder. And then a year later, 18 months later, he happens to be one of the co-authors of this legislation that's designed to build turbines over 25,000 acres of Louisiana offshore water. Well, his company stands to make tons of money off of this. Was this disclosed to anybody in the legislature? Was this disclosed by any other legislator? Hey, look, you know what? This doesn't really look good nationally. This doesn't really look good to the citizens of the state of Louisiana. Do you think maybe someone should say something about this? Nobody said anything. And guess what? The bill flew through the House and flew through the Senate. And now it's law in Louisiana. And big green energy companies are going to be getting hundreds of millions of dollars of federal subsidies, our taxpayer money, in order to build these turbines that don't work in our Gulf. Should that make some people mad?
Well, it's always, goes back to the old saying, follow the money and just see where that leads. And, it's unfortunate if this is the case that, legislators like Doty or whatever, I'll give her benefit of the doubt on this one because she did help with the Cypress District legislation and putting that forward and did as well as she could with it. But I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she just didn't pay close enough attention to the legislation or whatever, and maybe she didn't know about the potential conflict of interest here. So,
yeah, I think maybe so, because I think she's got a sincere heart, Duke, and I think that she is. I just think she's a good person, and I'm not sure that. And I think that maybe she was misled a bit. Doty's got a good heart, maybe a little bit naive in some ways, and I think maybe she was misled by some of these people. But I've seen her do too many good things to put her in the category of some of these other people. I'll tell you that. I just can't really do that in good conscience.
all right. So as we've been talking, I've been putting up, the couple of 2 or 3 pages of the letter that you authored and all that with the Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group. So if people want to follow your group, is your group on social media? How would they do that, or how would they keep up? Do you have a mailing list or anything like that?
Duke, we are very, very close to having our website put up. This really is something that was kind of born organic out of the very latter part of the last session, when I just finally said, nobody's speaking for the citizens down here, and these people are hypocrites because they're doing one thing here. And so we decided we're going to do this. So we're very, very young in the making, but we almost have our website up, and I'll go ahead and give it. It's www.lacag.org, www.lacag.org. And the email is, the primary email is info at lacag.org. And we are just very, very excited about doing what needs to be done. And our primary focus is to expose Republican legislators who are sabotaging the constitutional legislation, good legislation designed to protect the citizens of Louisiana, some of which we've talked about, and expose Republicans who support legislation like HB 165, which is not in the best interest of Louisiana citizens. And that's what we're all about, and that's what we're going to do, and we're going to do it unapologetically. And Duke, we're also going to speak out and try to find good conservative young men and women to run for office, because we have to have it.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and you're more than welcome to stay. We could actually sit here and go till probably midnight, or I don't know, maybe even daylight if we wanted to. But we've done a 3-hour marathon show before, but I've certainly enjoyed the conversation, and we'll make sure and start following your group too, especially if y'all happen to get on social media on Facebook or anything like that. We'll keep an eye out on your website, make sure that any of the materials that y'all release, we'll share out as well, just to try to keep everybody informed.
Thank you for that, Duke. Thank you for all of the work that you do, and for your uncompromising on things that really matter. And all I can tell you is they call you Duke for a reason. That you were not named Duke by accident.
Well, thank you.
All right. So, shall we end the segment there with Chris and let him get back to his normal life and family or whatever, and we'll proceed on bashing our local politicians?
God
We will
bless
continue
y'all. Y'all have a
on.
great evening. Thank you for having me on, and I'll come back anytime. Y'all keep up the good work.
You're welcome anytime. Thanks, Chris.